What happens when a life of perfect luxury turns into the perfect nightmare? For Eva Moreau, wife of billionaire mogul Alistair Moreau, her world was a fairy tale. A Manhattan penthouse, endless glamour, and a baby on the way, the heir to $1 billion empire. But while she was preparing a nursery, her husband was preparing a new life with his mistress. This isn't just a story of infidelity. It's the story of a secret cliff-top wedding, a pregnant wife who refuses to be erased, and the one piece of paper that could burn an empire to the ground, a DNA test. What would you do if the man who promised you forever was about to say "I do" to someone else? You're about to find out. The cold, late October rain lashed against the panoramic windows of the Moreau penthouse 60 floors above Central Park. Each pane of glass, an inch thick and soundproof, was designed to keep the chaos of New York City at bay, creating a silent, sterile paradise. For Eva Romano Moreau, the silence had lately become an enemy. At 8 months pregnant, she felt like a precious Fabergé egg displayed in a glass case for all to admire, but never to truly touch. Her husband, Alistair Moreau, was a man carved from ambition and success. His company, Moreau Global, had its tentacles in everything from tech to real estate, making him a titan of industry before his 40th birthday. To the world, he was a visionary. To Eva, he had been a whirlwind romance, a dashing prince who had swept the daughter of a respectable but not stratospherically wealthy Italian family off her feet. He had loved her for her passion for art history, her refusal to be impressed by his money alone. Or so she'd believed. Lately, the prince had become a ghost. He was there, but he wasn't. His suits, tailored to perfection, seemed to carry a foreign scent beneath the familiar notes of his Tom Ford cologne. Something floral and faintly musky, a perfume she didn't own. His nights grew longer, filled with emergency board meetings and last-minute flights to Singapore. He would return in the dead of night, slipping into their bed, with the chill of the outside world clinging to him, offering a perfunctory kiss to her forehead, before turning his back to her. The excuses were flawless, the logistics impeccable. His executive assistant, a woman with the efficiency of a military general, would send Eva perfectly curated updates. Mr. Moreau's flight was delayed. He sends his love. Mr. Moreau has a dinner with the board of directors. He will be home very late. It was a fortress of lies, and she was trapped inside. Her unease began as a whisper, a lingering glance at his phone when he angled it away from her, a credit card statement accidentally left on his mahogany desk with a charge for a $5,000 necklace from a boutique she had never visited. When she'd asked about it, he'd smiled that disarming smile that once made her heart flutter. "It's for you, my love. A surprise for when the baby arrives. You've ruined it now." He'd said, his tone a perfect blend of feigned disappointment and affection. The necklace never materialized. The whisper grew into a scream the day she found the briefcase. It wasn't his primary one, the sleek leather attaché he carried to boardrooms. This was his private one, a vintage piece he kept in the back of his walk-in closet, supposedly for old documents. He was on a supposed 2-day trip to London, and Eva, guided by a gnawing intuition she could no longer ignore, found herself standing before it. Her hands trembled as she worked the old brass clasps. Inside, nestled between financial reports and blueprints for a new hotel in Dubai, was a crimson leather folder. It wasn't a business document. The paper was thick, creamy cardstock, embossed with elegant gold calligraphy. Her blood ran cold as she read the names. Alistair Moreau and Serafina Dubois, request the pleasure of your company at the celebration of their union. Below the names was a date less than 2 weeks away, and a location, the Serenity Estate, Big Sur, California. A private, ultra-exclusive venue known for its cliff-top views and impenetrable privacy. A place for the mega-rich to hide their secrets. Serafina Dubois. The name hit her like a physical blow. She wasn't just some anonymous mistress. She was Eva's rival in every sense of the word. The daughter of a French hotel magnate, Serafina, was a fixture in their social circle. A woman with sharp, predatory beauty and an ambition that rivaled Alistair's. She and Alistair had been business rivals first, their public clashes making headlines in the financial press. The tension between them had always been electric, something Eva had naively dismissed as professional competition. Now she saw it for what it was, a prelude. A dark, dangerous courtship played out in boardrooms and industry galas. The room began to spin. Her hand went to her swollen belly, a protective instinct taking over. This wasn't just an affair. This was a coup. He wasn't just cheating. He was replacing her. While she was at her most vulnerable, carrying his child, his heir, he was planning to discard her and install a new queen. Her first impulse was to shatter something, to scream, to call him in London and unleash a torrent of rage and pain. But as she stood there, the invitation shaking in her hand, a different feeling began to crystallize over the initial shock, a cold, hard fury. He thought she was a fragile doll he could put back in its box. He thought she was a naive girl he could placate with lies and empty promises. He had underestimated her. He had forgotten the fire he claimed to have fallen in love with. She wouldn't cry. She wouldn't scream. She would act. Her mind, sharpened by betrayal, began to work. A public divorce would be messy, but he would control the narrative. His army of lawyers and PR experts would paint her as hysterical, unstable, perhaps even mentally unwell due to her pregnancy. They would use her pain against her. Serafina, with her powerful family and business acumen, would be portrayed as his equal, his true partner. Eva and her baby would be a footnote. A brief, unfortunate marriage. He was escaping. No. She would not be erased. She looked down at the invitation again. The celebration of their union. They were so arrogant, so sure of their victory, that they had printed the evidence of their treachery. Then the idea struck her. It was audacious, brilliant, and terrifying. It was a weapon so powerful it could not only stop the wedding, but also obliterate his reputation and secure her child's future beyond any doubt. What was the one thing that tied him to her irrevocably? The one thing Serafina couldn't give him. At least not yet. An heir. His heir. But in a world of lies, she needed irrefutable proof. A truth so absolute it could not be spun or denied. She carefully placed the invitation back in the folder, closed the briefcase, and put it exactly where she had found it. She wiped her tears, her expression hardening into a mask of calm determination. He would come home from his trip, and she would play the part of the loving, expectant wife. She would smile, ask about his meetings, and rub her belly, all while plotting the most spectacular interruption the world of the 1% had ever seen. She picked up her phone, her fingers scrolling through her contacts, until she found the name Marco Romano. Her brother, a bulldog of a lawyer in Milan, who had never trusted Alistair. "Marco," she said, when he answered her voice, steady, despite the storm raging inside her. "I need your help, and I need you to get on the next flight to New York. No questions yet. Just come." She hung up and made a second call this time to a private, highly discreet medical lab she'd read about in an article on celebrity paternity disputes. "Hello," she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "I need to schedule a prenatal paternity test. Yes, a non-invasive one, and I need the results in 10 days. It's an emergency." The game was on. Alistair Moreau was about to learn that hell hath no fury, like a woman armed with the truth and a certified DNA test. Marco Romano arrived at JFK looking like a storm cloud in a bespoke Italian suit. His face usually prone to easy smiles, and laughter was a thunderous mask. He had taken one look at his sister's pale, determined face and known this was not a simple marital spat. In the sterile silence of the penthouse, with the city lights twinkling like a cruel taunt below, Eva laid out the story. She handed him the crimson folder, her hand steady. Marco read the invitation, his knuckles turning white as he gripped the cardstock. "That son of a bitch!" He swore, his voice a low growl. "I knew it. I told Papa he was too slick, too polished. He buys and sells people like they're stocks. He's not just selling me Marco. He's trying to nullify me. Me and his son." Ava's hand rested on her belly. "He thinks I'll take a quiet settlement and disappear." "You won't," Marco said. It wasn't a question. "We won't let him. We'll sue him for everything. We'll drag his name through the mud." "No," Ava said, shaking her head. "A lawsuit takes years. His lawyers will drown us in paperwork. His PR team will destroy my reputation. By the time it's over, he and Serafina will be the established power couple, and I'll be the bitter ex-wife. He controls that battlefield. I need to fight him on mine." "Which is where, at the wedding," she said, a glint of steel in her eyes. "I'm going to stop it." Marco stared at her, a slow smile spreading across his face. The anger was still there, but now it was mixed with a fierce, familial pride. "Ava, that is a brilliant, insane plan. I love it. But how they'll have security tighter than Fort Knox. I am still Eva Moreau, his wife. They can't legally bar me from entering a public venue, even a private one, if I have a reason to be there. And I have the best reason." She paused, taking a deep breath. "I told you I made another call. I have an appointment tomorrow morning for a non-invasive prenatal paternity test. They take a blood sample from me and a simple cheek swab from the father. It analyzes the fetal DNA in my bloodstream against his. The results are more than 99.9% accurate." Marco's legal mind immediately saw the genius of it. "And how exactly do you plan to get a cheek swab from a man who is actively avoiding you and lying to your face?" "That," Eva said with a grim smile, "is the first step of the operation." Alistair returned from London, 2 days later, the perfect picture of a tired but dedicated husband. He brought Eva a small, thoughtful gift, a first edition of a book on Renaissance art he knew she loved. The gesture, which once would have felt romantic, was now a calculated, insulting lie. He was checking a box. "Be a good husband." "I missed you," he murmured, kissing her cheek. The ghost of that other perfume was still there, faint but undeniable. "I missed you too," she replied, forcing a soft smile. "You feel tired. Why don't you go take a long, hot shower? I'll have dinner sent up." It was the perfect bait. Alistair, ever the creature of comfort, readily agreed. The moment she heard the hiss of the water in their cavernous ensuite bathroom, she moved. Swiftly and silently, she went to the bathroom vanity. His electric toothbrush. It was the perfect, intimate tool. He used it every morning and every night. It would be rich with his DNA. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she carefully removed the brush head, placing it in a sterile plastic bag she had brought from the kitchen. She replaced it with an identical new one from a package she had hidden in her own vanity drawer. It took less than 30 seconds. She was back in the living room, calmly sipping a glass of water by the time he emerged, wrapped in a plush robe. "That's better," he said, running a hand through his damp hair. "I feel human again." "You're a monster," she thought, but her face showed only placid affection. The next morning, she feigned a routine OB/GYN appointment. Instead, she met Marco in a discreet black car and drove to the private lab on the Upper East Side. The facility was sterile and hushed, catering to a clientele that demanded absolute secrecy. A technician, a kind-faced woman who asked no questions, drew Eva's blood. Then, with a pair of sterile gloves, she took the toothbrush head and carefully swabbed the bristles. "The rush order will have the certified results ready in 7 business days," the technician informed her. "We will notify you via the secure portal you set up." 7 days. The wedding was in 9. The timeline was terrifyingly tight. The following week was the most agonizing of Eva's life. She lived a double life, a tightrope walk of deception. By day, she was the glowing mother-to-be, discussing nursery colors with decorators and smiling at Alistair's hollow compliments. By night, she and Marco were in a war room. Marco had flown in a private investigator. He trusted a grizzled ex-Mossad agent named Elias to gather intelligence. Elias, a man who moved through the city like a shadow, confirmed the wedding details. It was a masterpiece of clandestine planning. The guest list was small, no more than 50 people, all flown in on private jets and bound by ironclad NDAs. The staff were hired from an agency that specialized in servicing the illicit affairs of the super-rich. They're calling it a corporate retreat on all the official paperwork. Elias reported, his voice a gravelly whisper over a secure line. "The venue is locked down, but the bride couldn't resist. Serafina Dubois has hired her personal wedding planner, a man named Jean-Luc, known for his dramatic flair. He's a peacock. He might be our way in." While Elias worked his sources, Eva focused on the legal ammunition. She and Marco spent hours with her family's lawyer, the formidable Eleanor Vance, a woman known for eviscerating corporate titans in divorce court. Eleanor, a sharp woman, in her 60s with piercing blue eyes, listened to the entire story, without interruption. When Eva finished, she took off her glasses and polished them slowly. "Mr. Moreau is not just committing adultery," Eleanor said, her voice crisp. "He is attempting to commit bigamy, which is a criminal offense. The sheer arrogance is breathtaking. But more importantly, from a legal standpoint, he is engaging in a conspiracy to defraud you and your unborn child of what is rightfully yours. This secret wedding is an attempt to delegitimize your position as his wife and the mother of his heir before he files for divorce, hoping to secure a more favorable settlement with Serafina, already established as his partner." "So my plan to stop it," Eva began, "is not just dramatic, it's legally sound," Eleanor finished. "You would be preventing a crime and protecting your legal standing. The DNA test is the masterstroke. It's not just a prop, it's the foundation of your entire case. It establishes the child's paternity. Beyond any dispute, making any prenuptial agreement, he tries to enforce infinitely more complicated for him. The heir clause is standard in these contracts." On the 7th day, the email arrived. A simple, sterile notification. "Your results are now available on the secure portal." Eva's hands shook so violently that Marco had to type in the password. They huddled together in front of the laptop screen. A PDF document loaded. At the top was the lab's official letterhead, followed by a string of legal and medical jargon. And then, at the bottom, the conclusion stark and unambiguous. Alleged father, Alistair C. Moreau. Probability of paternity, 99.999%. Eva let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding for a week. It was a strange mix of vindication and profound sorrow. It was real, all of it. The lie, the baby, the betrayal. Marco printed out 10 copies on high-quality paper. He had one notarized and sent to a secure bank vault. He had another sealed in a waterproof envelope. "This is your sword and your shield," he told her, his eyes blazing with protective fury. The day before the wedding, Elias delivered the final piece of the puzzle. He had managed through a significant payment to the Peacock wedding planner, Jean-Luc, to obtain a full schedule of the event and a floor plan of the estate. "The ceremony is at 5 p.m. on the ocean terrace," Elias explained, pointing to a diagram. "Security will be focused on the main gate and the coastline, but there is a service entrance for the catering staff. They change shifts at 4:30 p.m. For 30 minutes there is chaos. That is your window." He slid a simple ID badge across the table. It had a photo of a woman who vaguely resembled Eva, with the name Anna and the word catering on it. "This will get you through the service gate," Elias said. "The uniform is in the bag. Once you're inside, you're on your own. Cause a scene and they'll throw you out before you ever get close. You have to blend in until the last possible moment." Eva looked at the badge, the uniform, and the notarized DNA report on the table. Her life had become a spy thriller. This was it. There was no turning back. That night, Alistair called her. His voice was smooth as silk. "My love," he said, "the deal in Singapore is heating up again. I have to fly back out tomorrow. I am so sorry to leave you alone, especially now. I'll make it up to you, I promise." "I understand, darling," Eva said, her voice a perfect imitation of a disappointed but loving wife. "Business is business. Just come home safe." "I always do," he said. As she hung up the phone, she felt a final chilling wave of clarity. He wasn't just a liar. He was a stranger. And she was about to reintroduce herself. The Serenity Estate was less a house and more a monument to wealth's power over nature. Perched precariously on a cliff overlooking the churning Pacific in Big Sur, it was a fortress of glass, steel, and redwood, designed to provide breathtaking views while remaining invisible from the winding coastal highway below. The air was thick with the scent of salt and eucalyptus, and the only sound was the roar of the waves crashing against the rocks, a perfect soundtrack for a secret. Eva arrived not in a chauffeured limousine, but in a beat-up rental sedan, which she parked a mile down the road in a public lookout spot. She changed in the cramped back seat, pulling on the drab black uniform of a catering waitress. It was ill-fitting over her 8-month belly, a fact she hoped would be attributed to a poorly managed uniform inventory rather than an imposter. The simple Anna ID badge felt heavy and foreign against her chest. Her long, dark hair was pulled back into a severe, unflattering bun, and she wore no makeup. She was anonymous, a ghost at the feast. She walked the final mile along the shoulder of the road, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. In her oversized server's handbag, nestled between a spare apron and a bottle of water, was a stiff manila envelope. Inside, sealed and notarized, was the DNA report. Her weapon. Just as Elias had predicted, the service entrance was a hive of controlled chaos. White vans were offloading crates of champagne and trays of canapes. Staff in identical black uniforms hurried back and forth, their faces set with concentration. Eva took a deep breath. lowered her head, and joined the stream of people moving toward the gate. A burly security guard with an earpiece glanced at her, his eyes sweeping over her uniform and belly before flicking to her ID. He grunted, his gaze bored, and waved her through. "Kitchen is to the left, main house to the right. Don't wander." She was in. She followed the signs for the kitchen, her mind racing. The plan was simple: blend in, find a hiding place near the ocean terrace, and wait for the 5 p.m. ceremony. She grabbed a tray of empty glasses, trying to look busy, her eyes scanning every corner, every doorway. The house was a marvel of modern architecture, with open spaces that flowed into one another, all oriented toward the stunning, infinite blue of the ocean. Through a massive wall of glass, she saw it, the terrace. It was decorated with a minimalist, almost severe elegance. Hundreds of white orchids seemed to float in the air, tied with invisible wires. A simple white altar stood at the cliff's edge. A string quartet was softly tuning their instruments. The 50 or so guests were beginning to arrive, their hushed, wealthy chatter echoing in the vast space. They were the titans of finance tech moguls, European aristocrats, the jury for the trial she was about to hold. She saw Serafina's father, Jean-Pierre Dubois, holding a glass of champagne, looking insufferably proud. She saw Alistair's business partners, men who had shaken her hand and complimented her at galas, now complicit in her humiliation. She found her hiding spot in a small service alcove off the main hall, concealed by a large potted ficus tree. It gave her a perfect, if partially obscured, view of the terrace. From there she watched. She saw Serafina emerge. She was breathtaking, a vision, in a custom-made gown that was more high fashion than bridal. It was sleek, severe, and impossibly chic. Her expression was one of triumphant bliss. She was a conqueror, claiming her prize. Then she saw Alistair. He stood at the altar, looking out at the ocean, his back to the house. He looked handsome, powerful, and completely at ease. He laughed at something his best man said, the sound carried on the wind. There was no trace of guilt or conflict in his posture. He had compartmentalized his life so perfectly that she, Eva, the mother of his child, had simply ceased to exist in this reality he had created. The sight of him so happy and untroubled extinguished the last of her fear. The cold, hard fury returned, magnified. The string quartet began to play Wagner. The guests fell silent. The officiant, a man with a soothing, deep voice, took his place. Serafina, on the arm of her father, began her walk down the aisle. Eva's hand went into her bag, her fingers closing around the manila envelope. This was the moment. It was now or never. She stepped out from behind the tree, walking not with the hurried shuffle of a waitress, but with the slow, deliberate grace of a queen. She moved from the shadows of the hall into the bright, late-afternoon sun of the terrace. A few guests at the back turned their heads, their brows furrowing in confusion at the sight of a pregnant waitress walking toward the ceremony. A security guard started to move toward her, but his step was hesitant. He saw a servant, but she carried herself with an authority that didn't match the uniform. Alistair had his eyes fixed on his approaching bride. He hadn't seen her yet. Serafina saw her first. Her step faltered. Her perfect smile tightened, a flicker of disbelief and then annoyance in her eyes. She thought Eva was a disgruntled employee, a madwoman who had slipped past security. Eva kept walking, her gaze locked on the man at the altar. She was halfway down the aisle when Alistair, sensing the disruption, finally turned. His face. It was a kaleidoscope of emotions, each one crashing over the last. First, utter complete shock, as if he were seeing an apparition. then a flash of pure, unadulterated fear. His eyes darted to her belly, then back to her face. Finally, it settled into a mask of cold, controlled rage. His public face, the one he used to intimidate boardrooms. "What are you doing here?" He hissed, his voice low and dangerous, meant only for her. She stopped just a few feet from him, standing between him and Serafina. The string quartet faltered, the music dying in a discordant squeak. A collective gasp rippled through the guests. This was no longer a wedding. It was a reckoning. "Hello, darling," Eva said, her voice clear and calm, carrying easily in the sudden silence. It wasn't the voice of a hysterical woman. It was the voice of a CEO announcing a hostile takeover. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but you seem to have forgotten something, or rather someone." Serafina, recovering her composure, stepped forward. "Who is this Alistair calls security? Get this woman out of here." "I don't think you want to do that," Eva said, not even glancing at Serafina. Her eyes were still locked on her husband. "Because I'm not this woman. I am Eva Romano Moreau, his wife." She let the words hang in the air. The whispers among the guests grew into frantic murmurs. Jean-Pierre Dubois's face turned a dangerous shade of purple. Alistair took a step toward her. "Eva, you are not well. You're confused. Let's go inside and talk about this." He was trying to control the narrative, to paint her as delusional. "I've never been more clear in my life," she said, pulling the manila envelope from her bag. "I know I wasn't invited to this celebration, but our son insisted we come." She placed a hand on her stomach. He didn't want to miss his father's second wedding. "This is a lie, a desperate, pathetic lie." Serafina's voice was sharp, brittle. "Alistair, she is trying to ruin us. A lie." Eva finally turned to face her rival. She gave her a look of profound pity. "You think this is a lie. You think our marriage is a lie. You think this child is a lie." She turned back to Alistair, whose face was now ashen. "He's told you so many lies, hasn't he? It must be hard to keep track." She opened the envelope and pulled out the DNA report. "I agree, though. In a world of lies, it's important to have proof." She held up the document for all to see. Her voice rang out clear and unwavering, cutting through the ocean roar. "This is a certified, notarized, and legally admissible DNA paternity test. It proves with 99.99% certainty that the man you are about to illegally marry, my husband Alistair Moreau, is the father of the child I am carrying." She took a step closer, holding the paper in front of his face. His eyes scanned the damning words, the official seal, the impossible percentage. The mask of control finally shattered. He looked trapped, defeated. "So by all means," Eva announced to the stunned audience, her voice dripping with ice, "please continue with this sham of a wedding. Marry this man. But know that you are marrying a liar, a criminal, and a man who was planning to abandon his pregnant wife and his legitimate son. And know that this document," she waved the paper, "will be the centerpiece of the biggest, messiest, and most public divorce proceeding this country has ever seen. It will be Exhibit A in the fraud case against him. Moreau Global stock might take a bit of a hit. I wonder what the board of directors will think of that." Silence. Absolute deafening silence, broken only by the cry of a distant gull. Then chaos. A reporter who had clearly been tipped off by Elias suddenly appeared from behind a hedge, his camera flashing. The guests, no longer an audience, but witnesses to a disaster, began to rise, speaking in panicked tones, their phones suddenly in their hands. Serafina looked from the DNA report to Alistair's broken face, the triumphant bliss in her eyes replaced by the horrifying dawn of comprehension. The prize she had won was worthless. Eva stood tall amidst the wreckage she had created. She had not screamed, she had not cried. She had simply spoken the truth, and the truth had been enough to bring an empire to its knees. She gave Alistair one last look, not of hatred, but of finality, then turned and walked slowly and deliberately back down the aisle, leaving him to face the ruins of his perfect secret world. The aftermath was not a quiet fallout. It was a nuclear explosion. The first photos hit the internet before Eva had even reached her rental car. A blurry shot of her pregnant and defiant, holding up the white paper. A close-up of Alistair's shocked face. A priceless image of Serafina, her couture gown looking like a costume in the harsh light of reality, her expression one of pure horror. By the time she and Marco were on a private jet back to New York, chartered by Eleanor Vance, who had been on standby, the story was the #1 headline worldwide. Hat Moreau scandal was trending globally. News vans were camped outside the Moreau global headquarters in Manhattan, the family home in Connecticut, and even Eva's parents' quiet villa in Lake Como. Alistair's PR machine, usually so omnipotent, was caught completely flat-footed. Their initial strategy was to stonewall. No comment. But in the vacuum of information the narrative Eva had crafted became the accepted truth. She was the wronged, pregnant wife. He was the villain. Serafina was the home wrecker. It was simple biblical and devastatingly effective. Eva expected Alistair to retreat to hide. She had misjudged him again. He was not a man who accepted defeat. He was a predator who, when cornered, became even more dangerous. He didn't retreat. He counterattacked. The first blow came 3 days later. A formal statement from Moreau Global's legal team was released to the press. It was a masterpiece of corporate gaslighting. We are saddened by the recent public display of Ms. Eva Romano, who is clearly suffering from extreme emotional distress. Mr. Moreau's relationship with Ms. Romano had regrettably ended many months prior to this incident, a fact Miss Romano has had difficulty accepting. While Mr. Moreau will honor his responsibilities to the unborn child, the claims of an ongoing marriage are misleading. The event in California was a private commitment ceremony, not a legal wedding. Mr. Moreau's primary concern at this time is for Ms. Romano's mental well-being and the health of the child. It was a brilliant, vicious strategy. They weren't denying the baby. The DNA test had made that impossible. Instead, they were painting her as unhinged, a delusional ex clinging to a dead marriage. They were trying to reclaim the narrative. He's trying to build a case for diminished capacity, Eleanor Vance explained in a conference call, her voice grim. He will claim you were so unstable he had no choice but to leave you, and that your dramatic display is proof of that instability. He's preparing for a custody battle. He'll try to prove you're an unfit mother. The second blow was more personal. A series of articles began to appear in gossip blogs and tabloids, sourced from friends close to Alistair. They painted Eva as a gold digger who had trapped the billionaire with a pregnancy when she felt him slipping away. They mentioned her volatile Italian temper and her unreasonable jealousy. They were subtle, poisonous whispers designed to erode her public sympathy. Eva felt the walls closing in. The stress was immense, and her doctor warned her about the potential effects on the baby. She began to doubt herself. Had she been too dramatic? Had she played right into his hands? No, Marco said, his voice like iron. He had moved into a guest room at the penthouse, a loyal guard dog. This is what he does. He suffocates his enemies with money and lies. We do not back down. We escalate. Their escalation was a formal legal filing, a divorce petition on the grounds of adultery, fraud, and attempted bigamy. Attached as Exhibit A was the notarized DNA report. As Exhibit B, a copy of the wedding invitation, and as Exhibit C, a sworn affidavit from the wedding planner Jean-Luc. Elias had paid the man another visit. Faced with the threat of being implicated in a criminal conspiracy and a significant wire transfer from an offshore account, Jean-Luc had sung like a canary. He confirmed that it was planned as a full wedding with a licensed officiant, and that the commitment ceremony line was a lie concocted after the fact. The filing was a direct hit. The unstable X narrative began to crumble under the weight of documented evidence. The media narrative shifted again. Now Alistair looked like a man trying to cover his tracks. He retaliated with a third, far more brutal blow. He froze her assets, every credit card Eva had, the accounts tied to the household, even her personal trust fund, which he had managed, were suddenly locked. The message was clear. "You want to fight me? I will starve you out." She was trapped in a gilded cage with no access to the vast wealth that surrounded her. The staff at the penthouse, their salaries paid by Moreau Global, became cold and distant, their loyalties clearly with the man who signed their checks. They were spies in her home. This was Alistair's fatal mistake. He thought cutting off her money would break her. But Eva had not been born into the Moreau fortune. She had grown up in a family where love and loyalty were the true currency. Stripped of Alistair's wealth, she was not weakened. She was liberated. She was no longer Mrs. Moreau, the billionaire's wife. She was Eva Romano, a fighter. With Marco's help, she moved out of the penthouse in the middle of the night, taking only her personal belongings and the baby's things. She left behind the designer clothes, the jewelry, the empty life. They moved into a modest but secure apartment that Eleanor Vance had arranged, paid for by a retainer from Eva's family. For the first time in months, she felt safe. The oppressive silence of the penthouse was replaced by the sounds of the city and the company of her brother and the unwavering support of her lawyer. Alistair, meanwhile, was bleeding. The scandal was taking its toll. Moreau Global stock had dropped 7%. The board, a collection of ruthless old men who cared about profit above all else, was growing restless. His personal brand, which was intrinsically linked to the company's, was toxic. The story of him trying to starve out his pregnant wife was not playing well with the public. He was also losing Serafina. Their grand romance had been exposed as a sordid, failed affair. Her father, the powerful Jean-Pierre Dubois, was humiliated. A potential merger between his hotel empire and Moreau's real estate division was now off the table. Serafina was no longer an asset to Alistair. She was a liability, a living reminder of his greatest public failure. Their union dissolved in a flurry of bitter, recriminating phone calls. She disappeared to her family's villa in the south of France, erased from the narrative as cleanly as Alistair had once tried to erase Eva. Desperate Alistair tried a new tactic, feigned remorse. He reached out through his lawyers, offering an incredibly generous settlement. A sum of money so vast, it would guarantee a life of luxury for her and their son, forever. All she had to do was sign an NDA, drop the fraud allegations, and agree to a joint custody arrangement that would heavily favor him. "It's a trap," Eleanor stated flatly. "He's not offering you money. He's trying to buy your son. The moment you sign that he will use his resources to gain full custody, and you will have no legal recourse to speak of the circumstances of his birth. He wants to control the heir, and he wants to silence you permanently." "Tell him no," Eva said without hesitation. This was never about the money. It's about the truth, and it's about my son's freedom from him." The rejection of his offer pushed Alistair over the edge. The Empire struck back one last time with its most fearsome weapon, a custody filing chock full of fabricated evidence of Eva's instability, backed by paid witnesses' former staff, a disgruntled old acquaintance, all attesting to her unsuitability as a mother. It was the declaration of total war. The battle would now be fought in a closed courtroom, away from the eyes of the media. It was his territory. He was confident he could win. But as Eva sat with her legal team, preparing for the fight of her life, she felt a strange sense of calm. He had thrown everything at her: public shaming, financial ruin, legal intimidation, and she was still standing. 2 weeks before the first custody hearing, her water broke. In a private wing of a hospital secured by Elias, Eva gave birth to a healthy baby boy. She named him Lorenzo Romano. She gave him her name, not Alistair's. It was a quiet, definitive statement. The Moreau dynasty had ended. A new Romano legacy had just begun. Holding her son in her arms, feeling his tiny, perfect weight against her chest, Eva knew the fight was far from over. But now she wasn't just fighting against something. She was fighting for someone. And that made her invincible. The custody battle was a brutal, drawn-out war of attrition fought in the sterile, soundproofed chambers of the New York family court. Alistair, flanked by a team of 6 lawyers, unleashed his arsenal. They portrayed Eva as a vindictive, unstable woman who had orchestrated the entire wedding scandal out of spite. They brought forth their paid witnesses who delivered rehearsed testimonies about her erratic behavior and violent mood swings. They submitted heavily edited audio clips from their home security system, snippets of arguments taken out of context to make her sound unhinged. Alistair himself took the stand, a masterclass in calculated performance. He was the picture of a heartbroken man, a father desperate to protect his child from a volatile mother. He spoke of his love for his son Lorenzo and his deep concerns for Eva's mental state. He never raised his voice. He was calm, reasonable, and utterly convincing. Eva watched this theater of cruelty from her seat. Her own legal team, led by Eleanor Vance, methodically absorbing every lie. When it was their turn, they did not respond with equal venom. They responded with cold, hard facts. Eleanor began by dismantling the unstable narrative. She presented the court with sworn affidavits from Eva's OB-GYN and a court-appointed psychologist, both of whom declared her to be a perfectly stable, competent, and loving new mother under immense stress caused solely by the defendant's actions. Then she addressed the edited audio clips. "Your Honor, Mr. Moreau's team has been kind enough to submit these recordings. We would like to play the full unedited versions for the court." The full recordings told a different story. They revealed Eva's mood swings to be calm, rational questions about Alistair's late nights and suspicious expenses. They revealed his reasonable tone to be condescending and evasive. The arguments were not screaming matches, but Eva pleading for honesty from a husband who was gaslighting her. The cornerstone of Alistair's case began to crack. The final stroke was Eleanor's cross-examination of Alistair himself. She was not aggressive. Her tone was almost academic. "Mr. Moreau," she began, "you have testified that your relationship with my client was over long before the incident in California. Is that correct?" "Yes, that's correct," Alistair said smoothly. "And yet you continued to live with her, sleep in the same bed, and maintain the public appearance of a happy marriage." "I was concerned for her fragility during the pregnancy," he said, deploying his pre-rehearsed line. "How considerate," Eleanor said dryly. "You also testified that the event in California was merely a commitment ceremony, not a legal wedding. Correct?" "Correct." "Then can you explain this document to the court?" She placed a document on the projector. It was a marriage license application from the state of California for Alistair Moreau and Serafina Dubois, signed by both of them and filed 2 weeks before the ceremony. A document Elias's deep network had managed to unearth. "This is a legal document, Mr. Moreau. Is this your signature?" Alistair stared at the screen. The blood drained from his face. It was the first time he looked genuinely trapped since the day on the cliff. It was a preliminary step," he stammered. "A contingency." "A contingency for what, Mr. Moreau committing bigamy?" Eleanor pressed. "Or was the commitment ceremony story the actual contingency in case you got caught?" She didn't wait for an answer. She moved to the final killing blow. "Mr. Moreau, you have filed for joint custody, stating your deep love for your son Lorenzo. Is that right? He is my son. I love him more than anything." Alistair said, his voice ringing with false sincerity. "Then can you tell the court your son's full legal name?" Alistair paused. A flicker of uncertainty crossed his face. He knew the first name, of course, but the last name. He had assumed. "His name is Lorenzo Moreau," he said with confidence. "Is it?" Eleanor asked softly. She gestured to an aide who brought forward a framed document. "Your Honor, we submit Lorenzo's official birth certificate." She placed it on the projector for the entire court to see. Name, Lorenzo Romano. The courtroom was silent. Alistair had spent millions of dollars fighting for custody of a child whose full name he didn't even know. In that single moment, his entire facade as a loving, concerned father crumbled into dust. He wasn't fighting for his son. He was fighting for an asset, an heir, a possession. And he had been so arrogant, so convinced of his own power, that he had overlooked the most basic detail. The judge's ruling, when it came a week later, was swift and brutal. Eva was granted sole legal and physical custody of Lorenzo Romano. Alistair was granted supervised visitation rights twice a month at a location of Eva's choosing. The judge's written opinion was scathing, citing Mr. Moreau's pattern of deceit manipulation and profound lack of genuine paternal interest. The divorce settlement that followed was a landslide victory for Eva. Faced with the evidence of attempted bigamy and fraud, Alistair's lawyers advised him to settle quickly and quietly to avoid criminal charges. Eva took nothing for herself, but established an ironclad, untouchable trust for Lorenzo that gave her full control until he came of age. She had secured her son's future, not with Alistair's tainted money, but in spite of it. In the months that followed, the Moreau empire continued to crumble. The board of directors, citing a crisis of confidence in his leadership and character, forced Alistair to step down as CEO. His public image was shattered beyond repair. He became a recluse in his Connecticut mansion, a king in a kingdom of one haunted by the family he had tried to discard, and the son who bore another man's name, the name of the woman he had fatally underestimated. 1 year later, on a bright, sunny afternoon, Eva was in Central Park. She was no longer Eva Moreau, the billionaire's wife. She was simply Eva Romano, a mother. She pushed a stroller along the path, pointing out the ducks on the pond to a giggling Lorenzo. She was dressed not in couture, but in simple jeans and a sweater. Her face, free from the stress and makeup of her former life, looked younger, happier. She had established a foundation funded by her own family, and a few anonymous supportive friends from her old life, dedicated to providing legal aid to women trapped in abusive high-conflict divorces. She was using her fire not for revenge, but for rescue. As she sat on a bench watching her son try to take his first wobbly steps on the grass, her phone buzzed. It was a news alert. Alistair Moreau had been spotted in public for the first time in months, leaving a hospital after a stress-related health scare. The photo showed a man who looked 10 years older, his face gaunt, his eyes empty. Eva looked at the photo, and for the first time felt a flicker of something close to pity. He had everything, and in the end, he had nothing. She had lost everything, and in the end, she had it all. She put the phone away, a small, genuine smile gracing her lips. Lorenzo stumbled and fell onto the soft grass, looking up at her with wide, trusting eyes. He wasn't crying. He was laughing. Eva laughed with him, the sound clear and free in the New York air. The storm was over. She had won. Eva's story is a harrowing journey through the darkest corridors of betrayal. But it's also a powerful testament to a woman's strength and a mother's love. She was pushed to the edge, stripped of her security, and publicly shamed, but she refused to be a victim. Instead of breaking, she became a warrior, using the very weapons of truth and legacy that her husband held so dear against him. Her victory wasn't just in the courtroom. It was in the moment she chose to give her son her own name, breaking the cycle of power and possession. What do you think? Was her public takedown at the wedding an act of genius, or did she go too far? Could she have fought this battle another way? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story of justice and survival captivated you, please hit that like button. Share it with someone who loves a story of epic revenge, and be sure to subscribe for more unbelievable real-life dramas.
And that wraps up today's story. Now we want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments, and let's see how far these stories reach. If this story moved you or gave you chills, give it a like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. One last thing, rate the story from 1 to 10 in the comments. Your feedback helps us bring you even better ones next time. Thanks for watching. We appreciate you being part of this storytelling journey.